workshops together collectively. So I will go ahead and give a few words about Carla here. So Dr. Spagnoletti serves as the Associate Division Chief of Education for the Department of General Internal Medicine. She also oversees 10 fellows in her role as the Director of the Academic Clinical Educator Scholars Fellowship in General Internal Medicine, and over 35 postgraduate students in her role as Director of the Master's and Certificate Program in Medical Education at the ICRE, which I think a lot of folks know her from there. She is passionate about medical education and scholarship. She's mentored numerous fellows and faculty, including ours as well here, and has several areas that she works on in professional development, including patient-doctor communication, patient satisfaction, and anti-racism in medical education. She's published 46 peer-reviewed manuscripts and 11 invited papers and proceedings in the medical field, and she really has done a tremendous amount of work on campus to help us hope to improve our academic scholarship in medical education here. So with no further ado, I will have Carla start our workshop.
Thank you. Thanks, Noelle. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I am going to minimize your pictures for a moment just so that I can take a look at my slides, but there is going to be an interactive component to today. And so, Noelle, are they allowed to turn their cameras on, or is that it? Okay. During the interactive part, if you're able to turn your camera on, that would be great. If not, we will do our best to do the small group activity. So I am obviously going to talk about workshops and really focus on best practices on developing an effective workshop. And I know that you will have another opportunity to actually create a workshop and brainstorm ideas so that you as a group can focus on getting more of those workshops submitted to national meetings, but we'll have a good start today. So you don't have to turn your camera on per se, but I am interested in knowing, so just unmute yourself and tell me how many of you have had a prior experience with submitting and presenting a workshop at a regional or national meeting. I think some of you I know for a fact have. So tell me a little bit about what challenges you had, Kate, when you were preparing the workshop or preparing to deliver the workshop.
So for me, it was this past year was my first time delivering a workshop. So I think just thinking about how to formulate it in different ways, sort of, because you're not able to anticipate how many people are going to come to the workshop or like the interaction that you're going to have at the workshop. So sort of being flexible in your planning, but also like setting to a good plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so sticking to a plan, but also being flexible. And we'll definitely talk about how that's important, and then also some ways how to do that later. So today, what we're going to do is explore workshops and what are the steps that you need to create a successful workshop. But first, we need to sort of make sure we're on the same page. So really, a workshop is considered to be a few different things. It can be a set of activities designed to promote learning, discussion, and feedback about a topic. It can be in a seminar format that emphasizes free discussion, exchange of ideas between participants. It can demonstrate methods of practical application of skills and principles. It can be considered a brief, intensive course for a small group that emphasizes problem solving. In the medical field, typically we refer to workshops as taking place at a regional or national meeting. Although today we're kind of doing a workshop on workshops, and so it's local sometimes as well. But those definitions above hit on key points that are really important to consider when you're presenting a workshop. So the objectives for today are for me to describe the benefits of presenting workshops at national or regional meetings and to provide a comprehensive blueprint for developing and presenting a successful workshop, outline ways to make your workshop count twice or more is going to be what we end with. So I'm pretty certain that most, if not all of you, have actually been to meetings and have attended workshops. So when you're going to a meeting and you have lots of opportunities to go to many different types of sessions, what causes you to choose to go to a specific workshop? What are you looking for? What draws you to it? Anyone?
For me,
Being
usually,
able to, oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead, Ellie.
I was just gonna say the thought that maybe I could come away with a new skill that I didn't have, or to get better at an area that I feel uncomfortable in. So, you know, something with, you know, like evaluating milestones, for example, if there was a workshop on that, or, you know, a struggling learner. I always appreciate having diverse perspectives from different individuals that have different backgrounds. So yeah, something that I think will help me enhance my practice and also my skills as an educator.
Okay. So you're definitely looking for something that you're going to spend that hour or 90 minutes actually gaining skills, and also coming into contact perhaps with people who are experts in the area. Noelle, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of time motivated by content, by something, learning something that I, want to develop a skill on is probably the me to go the most.
So looking for that specific content area that you have interested in, that you also have already identified as wanting to learn more about.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, those are all really good reasons as to why folks attend workshops. People attend workshops mostly because the topic at hand is applicable to their professional development or their clinical, educational, or research area of interest. And workshop versus maybe a symposium or a plenary allows for a more efficient, effective, and enjoyable environment in terms of participation and ability to network. And then also it's more efficient, effective, and enjoyable generally than reading, self-directed reading on a given subject, which of course you could do. You could look at the titles of the workshops available at a meeting and then say, okay, I'm going to go home and look this topic up and I'm going to learn what I need to learn that way. But this is much more enjoyable and efficient and effective way at learning. The other reason why someone said, I think Ellie said, is to a network with people who have similar interests as you. Sometimes it's people who have similar interests. Sometimes it's people who have an area of expertise that you would like to tap into. Sometimes it's potentially being given by a group of people that you might want to collaborate with in the future on a project or on a workshop. So also, one thing is to attend workshops. The other is to actually present workshops yourself. And sometimes that can be daunting because you think, oh, well, I might not be an expert, or that's a really big venue, a national conference. Is that really something that I'm qualified to do? But I would suggest as clinician educators and academic clinician educators that you certainly do have the chops to do this. And there are a lot of benefits to you professionally for presenting workshops at national meetings. So one is to hone your teaching skills. So you all do teaching on a daily basis. You teach at a local level. You might teach clinically. You might teach in the small group or classroom setting. But you're teachers. And so this just gives you a larger platform with more visibility to hone your teaching skills and to practice your teaching skills. In addition, it serves as a form of scholarly activity, same as other scholarly work that you may do, like a curriculum development project or even a publication, a book chapter, so on and so forth. It counts. We'll talk about that in a second. I already mentioned networking with experts and gaining new collaborators, and then disseminating your work. So you may be working on something locally and it's really great, it's going well, you've done a great job at advertising it and talking about it locally. Well, now it may be a really great opportunity to present what you're doing locally on a more regional or national level by turning what you're doing into a workshop. And then because it does serve as a form of scholarly activity, it is one of those things that you put on your CV and that promotions committees look at when talking about or when thinking about getting promoted from your current level to the next level. So what are some differences in terms of the value of workshops versus publishing? Well, I tell people that you should consider presenting a workshop on a certain subject matter, at least first, when you lack time or financial support to perform a full research or curricular development project in an area of interest, when your project is maybe at an early stage and you want to pilot your ideas with the national audience, and when you have a work in progress with some but only preliminary data, you haven't completed your data collection or your data analysis yet. And also, depending on the workshop topic, sometimes it's okay to not have any data at all, depending on the topic. And then also, you would consider doing a workshop instead of trying to do a publication if the workshop topic doesn't really lend itself to a peer-reviewed publication format. So let's talk about workshops and promotion. Workshops do provide evidence of scholarly work for those in educator tracks. Again, this is really institution specific, but many academic institutions have educator tracks, including our own, and workshops are considered evidence of scholarly activity for clinician educators. According to the AAMC guidelines for promotion for clinician educators, evidence of scholarly work in teaching includes any activity that fosters learning, including direct teaching and creation of associated instructional materials, invited presentations such as workshops related to teaching expertise, and presentation in a peer-reviewed or invited forum at a regional national meeting. And they also count evaluations from conference presentations. So all of these elements are considered evidence of scholarly work in teaching according to the AAMC, and you can get all of these by presenting workshops. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about workshop development from start to finish. So the first step is to choose your topic and choose your collaborators. Depending on your history of working with a specific group, you might choose your collaborators first and then choose a topic, but these are the two things that need to happen first. So first question is, what makes a good topic? And I'm going to say pretty much anything makes a good topic. We have done a lot of workshops in my division, and I can say that we've hit on pretty much every single one of these that I'm about to show you. So clinical area of interest is a popular one, that which pertains to health policy or advocacy, a quality improvement topic, teaching skills, work-life balance, professional development, research methods, and those topics that are training related. And so pretty much anything that you can think of and anything that you do in your daily work, you can convert into a workshop topic. So what makes a good topic in particular is one that the presenter or presenters are passionate about, but not necessarily expert in. So you do not have to be an expert in a specific area in order to present a workshop. So I would just say that you will have that sense of, sometimes folks will have that sense of imposter syndrome. I can't possibly stand on a national stage and talk about that topic because I am not the world's leading expert in that topic. But I will say that your job is to have a good topic, and to attract people to your workshop. And if it gets accepted, then your next job is to become, for lack of a better word, an expert once it gets accepted, that you're going to teach yourself so that you can teach others. You also want to make sure that the topic is timely. Also, a potentially controversial topic that oftentimes gets a lot of traction at annual meetings. So of course, as you can imagine, the first submission period after COVID hit, like 50 to 75% of the topics that were submitted had something to do with COVID. And so that was really relevant. So just kind of get a sense of what is a hot topic in your area of interest and try to frame it around that. Also, a topic that aligns with the meeting's educational objectives. So a lot of meetings will have very clear educational objectives written on the website. And also a lot of meetings will have a yearly theme. So for our national meeting that we go to in internal medicine, every year they release the theme almost a year in advance of when the meeting is going to happen. And if you can find a way to connect your workshop topic to that theme, you're more likely to get it accepted. Also, workshops that provide opportunities for hands-on or skill-based practice or learning are really popular. And oftentimes reviewers are going to look for evidence that you are going to be doing hands-on or skill-based practice or learning during your workshop, rather than get the sense that you're just going to stand up there and talk to people and tell them information. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is that the topic has to be narrow enough to be covered in the appropriate depth within the time allotted, and that can get tricky. So you don't want to pick a topic that's so broad that you can only skim the surface, given that most workshops at national meetings are either 60 or 90 minutes. You want to make sure that you hone down on within your area of interest on something that you can educate on and provide adequate enough information and depth, and also still have time left over for doing interactive activities during that 60 to 90 minute period. So just keep in mind that you don't want to try to cover too much. A note about finding collaborators. So one really important aspect of finding collaborators is their working style. How do they get the job done? Do you know what kind of worker they are? Are they like a worker bee, or are they the big picture person? A lot of times in our division, we will oftentimes have somebody who's more senior, who's kind of the person whose name people recognize, and also is a person who can easily stand up and work a crowd, but they aren't necessarily the person you're going to rely on to get the slides done on time. And so you want to make sure that you think about what kind of working style an individual has, and make sure that you have the appropriate cadre of co-authors or co-presenters that can get the job done and make it appealing for the audience. Certainly expertise is to be considered. Like I said, you don't have to be an expert in order to present a workshop. You don't have to be an expert in order to submit an abstract to be considered to be presented at a national meeting. But sometimes you may want to have a collaborator or two whose main thing that they're contributing is expertise on that topic. Another thing to think about is career stage. So depending on the cycle with the meeting that you're presenting to, you will get usually a couple months notice that your workshop was accepted, but then you have a lot of work that you have to get done. And so thinking about how busy your collaborators may be and how much time and attention that they can commit to getting that workshop together is important. And so sometimes it's great to have a variation in career stage. Another thing to think about is that if you are somebody who is a little bit more well-versed in having presented workshops or taught at a national level, it's really nice to include people who are more junior to you, because you can also take this opportunity as a mentoring experience. And then in terms of other things to think about, whether or not to collaborate with people who are not in your specific institution. The pros of only collaborating with people at your institution is that you might have more direct access to them, and it might be easier for you to talk with them, coordinate with them, meet with them in the time leading up to the workshop. But there also are some perks to considering inviting people from other institutions to collaborate with you. Of course, it's a really great networking opportunity. So if you do know that there's somebody who's doing similar work to you, or someone who may be an expert in your field, but they're not in your institution, and you think that they go to the meeting that you're submitting the workshop to, then reach out and ask them if they want to be part of that, because they will help you with the workshop, but you'll also have the opportunity to forge a relationship that will help down the line with other things. The other thing to know about what the meeting that you're submitting to looks at is whether or not it's a blind review. So some meetings have a blind review, some don't, but the ones that don't have a blind review, oftentimes they are looking at the authors themselves, and it tends to look good as for certain topics more than others maybe, but it tends to look good if there are presenters from different institutions than just one institution. So it's not an absolute rule, but if you do have one or two people that you can think of outside your institution that would be good to add as a collaborator, then consider asking them for those reasons. All right, the next step then is to prepare the workshop submission or the abstract. And part of what goes into that is writing learning objectives, considering the structure of the workshop, which is going to dictate the narrative paragraph that you're going to work on for the submission. And, you know, kind of just making sure that your abstract meets all of the criteria that the meeting is asking for. So learning objectives are really important. That's one thing that helps set the tone for your workshop. It helps guide you as the person trying to get the workshop together eventually in terms of what you should be focusing on and what you should be covering. And it's certainly one of the most forward-facing pieces of your workshop submission that abstract review committees consider. So your learning objectives should encompass the main learning tasks of the workshop and summarize what the participant will be able to do after attending the workshop. So how are they going to be transformed by coming to your workshop? What can they be expecting as a result of having attended? You should use the SMART format. And I know most of you are aware of this, have heard of this, but SMART format being, it should be specific, saying exactly what the learner is going to be able to do. It should be measurable, which means it can be observed by the end of the training session. It is attainable for participants within the scheduled time and specific conditions. So within the 60 minutes that you have in the context of the national meeting. Relevant to the needs of the participant and the organization. So trying to connect hot topics or things that are important for that national meeting's theme. And then time frame. So again, achievable by the end of the training session. And then the other thing to think about when writing learning objectives is what verbs you're going to use. So those are really important. Just as a reminder, there's some good verbs and bad verbs. So good verbs tend to be more active. So good ones that I like to tap into when I'm writing learning objectives are using the words define, demonstrate, describe, explain, identify, list, name, outline, select, and summarize. And that's in contrast to what we would consider bad or passive verbs, such as learn, understand, know, realize, perceive, be aware of, or be able to. Okay, then the abstract itself. So the abstract, the summary of the workshop is essential for selling the workshop to the reviewers and also for attracting audience members, because most of the time what you submit to the review committee is the summary that also gets published on the meeting website or in the meeting agenda. So you don't really get a second chance to revise this. So just write it with two things in mind: attracting the reviewers to get them to say yes to your workshop, and then probably more importantly, attracting meeting attendees to actually come into your workshop instead of go to someone else's workshop. So it should focus on three things. First, the background information has to highlight why this topic is important to the prospective audience. So that's your time to make the argument about why this is even worthy of a workshop. The next part is what can those attendees expect to happen during the workshop? And that's in terms of how will the learning objectives that you just wrote be achieved, and really highlight or stress the interactive portions of the workshop. And then finally, the last part of the summary should focus on what the attendee can expect to take away. What can they take away, or what will they take away in terms of knowledge or skills? And also in terms of tangibles. Are they going to walk away with resource materials, with handouts? Are they going to walk away with a workshop summary written by the end of the workshop? So be really clear about what they can expect. In terms of the structure, it should be both didactic and interactive. The didactic component is best to deliver information that is needed in order for the person attending to participate in the interactive component. Or the didactic component is best for answering questions generated by the interactive component. So in general, the ratio or the breakdown of what happens during that 60 to 90 minutes, 1/3 of it should be spent doing didactics and 2/3 of it should be spent on interactive components. The interactive components can take a lot of different forms. So that's not necessarily super prescriptive, but it is a really good way of looking at it, that you should be doing less talking and more interaction. So in terms of the interactive components, these can be done in combination with the large and small group format. And usually people choose to do a mix of both. Some common activities that folks choose to insert into their workshops are case-based. So having cases with probing questions that elicit discussion in small groups or large groups. Learning or skills stations, really good if your workshop's focusing on like a procedural skill. Modified team-based learning format, basically you will separate your attendees into teams and have them answer questions and then vote on the correct answer. Best used when there might be some disagreement about what is the right answer, or there may be varying levels of expertise in your audience, because that is a way to hook people into saying, oh, I really do want to know what the right answer is, so I'm going to pay attention to the next part of the workshop. And then role play is another thing. Just one word about role play. I love role play, and I do a lot of patient-doctor communication work and faculty development work. And so role play is a common thing that I go to in my teaching methodology. I will say that I have shied away from being really overt with role play as being one of the major activities that's going to occur during workshops, because there are a lot of people that don't like role play. And if they see that they're going to be subject to role play, that in and of itself might make them not want to come to your workshop. So I typically don't focus on that, and I only use role play if it's absolutely necessary on a national level, just because there's not as much group safety because people don't know each other. All right, where to place the activities depends. It depends on your topic, and it depends on how you like to do things. So some people like to start with the didactics to equip the audience with the information they need to support the activity that's going to happen. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing a lot of didactic, but I'm giving you the information you need in order to do the activity. The activity that we're going to do, it wouldn't make sense for me to give that to you first and then tell you how to do it. But depending on the topic, another way to do it is start with the interactive activities to highlight what the audience doesn't know and then teach them with your didactic. So if it's like a clinical content area, what I see people doing a lot is giving small groups some questions to work on where the answers to those questions aren't exactly clear, or highlight controversies in the subject matter. And then that kind of is the hook for them to want to say, oh, I'm gonna really pay attention to the didactic part so that I can figure out where I went wrong with my answers. Make sure you give your audience clear instructions and expectations for activities, especially when assigning small group breakout activities. You need to make sure that they know what they're supposed to do and how much time they have to do it in. So make sure that you give them a clear timeline. Make sure you tell them ahead of time, or if you're going to ask the group to report back to the large group, because two things. Number one, that will give them the opportunity to be prepared and maybe even assign a scribe for the group, and also take into account the fact that group reporting. So if you're going to have small groups and then have them come back together as a large group, that is something you need to factor into the timing of the workshop. Also, remember that large group discussions can be helpful. So it doesn't always have to be a small group activity or solely small group activities. Large group discussions can be really helpful, especially to close out a topic or a workshop in order for people to share what they learned in the small group, but also people like to share what they know on the topic. And so giving that outlet can help with exchange of ideas, and typically is served best at the end so that you can actually be prepared to maybe cut that part short if you're running out of time. Yeah, okay. So now I'm going to turn you over to the small group activity, and I'm actually going to look and see who's on. I think there's a small enough a group that's on that we don't need to break out, I would say, because some people are, yeah, you're in the room and Savannah's in the room. So the folks that are online only can participate just together as a group. So for the small group activity, and I'm just looking at my time, I'm gonna we're only gonna have time to sort of be a little bit sort of higher level of the activity. So I'm gonna give you about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back together as a group and I'll finish up. But basically what I want you to do is use the worksheet that I provided, and you're going to work through that. The first page, or the front of the page, is really the instructions for the workshop. And then the back of the page is just a template that you can use if you want to write on it. You don't have to, but it's just sort of a template that we use when we're thinking about all the different components of what we need to prepare for the workshop submission. So go ahead and work together as a group. The first step that you'll need to quickly do as a group is decide of the topics that I listed as possibilities at the top. Decide which topic your group is going to want to create a workshop around. And then from there, you're going to work on learning objectives. You're going to work on the summary. Why is it important? What's going to happen during the workshop? And what is your audience going to take home? So if you could work on that for 20 minutes, and I can be here if you have questions, I'll pop in as well, but get to work on that and we'll see how far you get in terms of collectively writing a workshop submission.
I don't know if you guys can turn your cameras on. If you can, I see there's Ellie and Kate and Marissa and Carol. We lost people when we said small groups. Ellie or Kate, do you have any preference for picking a workshop topic?
I think Kate should pick, because I'm on direct care and I have gotten paged about Q2 minutes during this presentation so far, unfortunately.
Carol, do you have a preference?
No, I'm a rather passive participant here so far.
I guess why don't we take that back?
When I read the list before this meeting started, I was looking at number 2, but I don't have a strong preference.
Okay, I like that.
Sounds great.
So the topic's going to be how to make large group lectures interactive. So as a group, if you want to designate one person to write it down, that might be helpful. I'm not sure if everybody on this meeting actually goes to the same conference, or if you go to different conferences, but if there is a cluster of you that go to the same conference, then you actually could consider working together to actually submit a workshop like this. So it may be helpful to have things written down. But you're going to focus on why is this topic important? How can you imagine your participants spending their time? And what specific knowledge, skill set, or materials will participants be able to take home from attending your workshop?
I can be the scribe. I'm happy to be the scribe.
I mean, obviously, probably as educators, we all think the topic is important. So how do we get that message across? Why it's important to put in there. What do you think? I don't know, you could just, Erica's here in person, so she can,
Oh, perfect.
you can hear her. We all know your voice, Erica.
Sorry about that. I'm joining, but just muting.
So I guess a question to help with this one is, what might be a good hook? Is there something that you can say at the get-go that's really gonna resonate with people who do large groups? What are the potential problems that teachers encounter when they're doing large group lectures? And can you
So
twist that
the-
into a hook?
I think like there's always the fear of silence when you know, ask things. So I think maybe incorporating that.
I think there's the, for the speaker, there's the, with the audience and losing that and having them be multitasking and, you know, not really connecting and retaining their attention. I think how much are you gonna get out of it? Like, you know, are you gonna get bored? And, you know, what are you specifically gonna get out of it, I think? Motivate you.
So a lot of times we kind of almost think about it as how would like an advertising agency write this and say something like, you know, are you tired of spending an hour watching your students fall asleep? Or, you know, do you look out at your audience and wonder if they're listening to you or if they're looking at social media on their computers? Or, you know, are you bored and tired of giving the same lecture that you've always given? Are you interested in finding out how to spice it up or how to make it more fun? So something like that. Because again, you're speaking both to the abstract reviewers and this will, but you're also speaking to the people who are walking down the hallway trying to figure out which room they're going to go in. So giving them a hook, something like that, can sometimes make it look a little bit more appealing. Let's focus on what are some interactive components that you could imagine incorporating into this type of workshop.
I think showing them some interactive tools that they could see that they could, you know.
Yeah. Tell me more about that word show.
So, demonstrating polling and maybe having them make their own poll or something like that.
Yeah. So demonstrating use of technology that can help with interaction.
You could have them break out into small.
Oh,
Sorry, break out into small groups and sort of have them brainstorm on ways to make it more interactive, just to sort of start the process and then sort of have those things already prepared for the next like short didactic session.
Yeah. So you could have them come up with their own answers first, just to get the juices flowing, and so that they can compare what they came up with to what you'll tell them are best practices. Any other ways of going?
That's going to say, with the caveat that
Ellie,
I've seen Carla do this talk, but you know, all of the demonstrating all of the techniques that you're gonna sort of the tools you're gonna get them to use. So cold calling, maybe a whiteboard, that sort of thing, incorporating all of that into the even more didactic part of the workshop. So sort of showing that on the recording.
Yeah, and that's I would say that's a really important point, especially if you're doing a workshop on teaching. You should practice what you preach. So if you're teaching others about different skills or methodologies, then you should apply those skills and methodologies to that teaching. And that sometimes may be a little bit more difficult to. Something like that is kind of, it's more like on a meta level, and sometimes it can be surprising, and you have to point it out to the audience what you're doing. And so it's sometimes a little more difficult to write it in the summary, but you could say that the workshop presenters will use various techniques and then highlight them and point them out as they're using them to deliver this workshop. Another thing that's really popular is like showing good and bad versions of things. So, you know, showing like a little snippet, whether that's an actual thing that has happened and you've gotten permission, or that you simulated. Sometimes we can even use things from television shows and movies that are like bad examples of things, and then ask the audience to point out like what they could have done differently, and then even potentially show a better version, or a version that incorporates some of the techniques or skills that you want them to practice. Another thing that I think is also really important is to give people the opportunity to vent about any negative things that they have to say or feel about the topic. So a lot of times we will teach them a skill or to convince them that doing something some way is really important and that they should do it that way. It's nice to balance that by saying, what barriers have you encountered when you've tried to make your lectures more interactive, and let them sort of talk about the hard parts of it or the downsides to it as well. What can you imagine? Go ahead, Kate.
Oh, sorry. One thing I really liked that I've seen done when I've participated in workshops was when they do pair sharing, but they tell you to talk with someone that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also a really good opportunity to network.
Yes. Yes. So you can give.
I also like the. Oh, sorry.
Ellie,
I was just gonna say I also like try my best to participate here despite the ongoing service stuff. I like the technique of like writing each table or something will write their response or their ideas on a white pad, and then this is when things are obviously in person, but having everyone rotate around and kind of critique, not necessarily critique, but give feedback on each other's whiteboards or easels, and kind of either leave notes in the form of sticky notes on their easels with thoughts or ideas or feedback that they had. And that gets everyone participating and also giving active feedback.
Yeah, that's great. And then you're kind of thinking about like a way to get small groups doing some work with the intention of when they come back together as a large group that they'll be doing some sharing of the work that happened in the small group as well. So you could tell them when they break up into small groups that we want every group to come up with one innovative way to make large group lectures interactive, and we're going to ask you to share it with the larger groups. You can kind of give them a heads up. Just because of time, let's have consensus on one learning objective, and I'd love to see an active verb used. So what would one learning objective be for a workshop on this topic?
Could be something like demonstrate 4 interactive techniques to utilize in a large group by the end of
I love that because it's an active verb. It's There's a specific quantity of techniques that they can expect to walk away. And you give specific notice that that is achievable by the end of the 60 minutes of coming to your workshop. Great. The other things that sometimes you're asked to provide at the time that you submit the workshop is an actual timetable of how you're going to use every last minute of your workshop. And so it's really important to not overpromise, and also make sure that internally you build in some flexibility, because sometimes it doesn't start on time. Like, you know, my fault, I got here a couple minutes late, and so today it didn't start on time. So now I need to make sure I'm flexible in what we're going to do. But the review committee likes to know exactly how much time, and what they're looking for again is that 1/3 didactic, 2/3 interactive. So when you list out what amount of time you're going to spend on each activity, keep that in mind. And I have that at the bottom of the worksheet. Okay, so just a taste of it. And I know that Kate and Ellie are going to be back for a session that's going to go more into depth with the hands-on parts of developing workshops that that you may want to collaborate on or submit to a national meeting yourself. So we'll move on because I do want to talk about step 3, which is actually developing the content once it is accepted for presentation, because there's a lot of work, probably more work to do in that phase. First is to consider how you're going to delegate the work. So you have 2 options on getting the prep work done. First, you can do it yourself and then ask your collaborators for input on what you've done, what you've developed of the final product. Or you can break the content into definable pieces and assign one to each collaborator based on their interest, expertise, or strengths. And of course, that's preferred because, first of all, you want to tap into the talent of your collaborators, and they're going to be more invested in this if they have a little bit more skin in the game. And of course, as the workshop organizer, it is going to be a little bit less stressful for you than if you would have done it all yourself and just sort of asked for feedback. Couple of things for optimizing the preparation phase. As the workshop leader, you must set a timeline with expectations and deadlines, especially if you're going to be delegating out parts. You have to make sure that people know what they're supposed to do and what it's supposed to look like, and also by when you want a rough draft. You got to keep people on track. And this can be really difficult, especially if you're working with collaborators who may be more senior to you, because it's kind of like wrangling cats sometimes. And so you really just have to set out your clear expectations ahead of time so that everybody knows what needs to be done so that they can contribute to the whole. Note that material, of course, should be evidence-based if possible. And so I kind of mentioned this earlier, but the presenters should prepare themselves to be quote unquote expert on their assigned topic or role. So you should prepare yourself by the time you stand up there and give the presentation as much as you possibly can. It just makes you feel more comfortable standing up on a national platform teaching content, and it helps you to be more prepared for people who are going to ask questions or try to veer off topic. And then planning meetings should be held with the entire group. So if it's your first time leading a workshop, or you're with folks maybe that you don't know their working styles as much, it's better to make more frequent planning meetings and more planning meetings. Sometimes you can just do things over email and then come together one time before the actual workshop. So you can feel it out, but just make sure that everyone involved knows that they're going to be going to planning meetings. And then the actual presentation, so didactics typically are in PowerPoint or some similar presentation format. Small group activities are usually accompanied by supplementary materials. So if you are going to have them answer multiple choice questions, or you're going to have them like fill out a handout, then I tell people to bring plenty of copies with you, because you really never know how many people are going to come, or plan on making copies once you get to your destination. But having hands-on material is something that is really expected of most, expected by participants of most workshops. And then of course, make sure you adhere to the meeting's deadlines for handouts. or inclusion of workshop materials on the website. The reason I tell you this is because sometimes it's a little bit more work to get all of the stuff done ahead of time, but if there's a deadline after which you can no longer have your materials posted, then that is going to it's going to be detrimental in that people who are trying to decide between two workshops, they don't have any access to what they might be able to get from your workshop. It's like a black box. Also, it cuts down on the number of people that individually reach out to you and ask you for your materials. You can just refer to the meeting website for that. It does take a little bit extra work and you have to plan ahead. And then, of course, prepare any take-home materials that you promised them. And then I always tell people to hold a dress rehearsal practice session. So if you're working with people at your institution, you can do this before you leave for the meeting, but sometimes it's a matter of reserving an hour with the collaborators at the meeting itself in someone's hotel room or in the lobby to just briefly run through to make sure everyone's on the same page and understands what the timeline is. And then presenting the workshop, a couple of things. Arrive early if you can to prepare the room. If you want small groups, and you ask for small round tables and you come in and it's a big, huge lecture hall, that's good for you to at least know. And if you get there early enough, sometimes you can rearrange the room to make it the way that you want it to. And then get to know your audience when you start. So if you are not familiar with the people in your audience, and you usually aren't familiar with them on a national platform, do an icebreaker, kind of get a sense of like, why did they come to the workshop, or what level in their career are they, or do they, to what extent do they consider themselves an expert on the topic? You can make it up, but just get some information through an icebreaker to get the juices flowing and get a sense of who your audience is, and try to figure out why they came. It's nice to know ahead of time what their expectations are so that you can manage them a little bit better. Also, adhere to the timeline. We like to designate a co-presenter as the timekeeper, as the designated timekeeper, to bug the other presenters if they're going over. And then prepare a backup plan if the timeline gets derailed. So if there's something that you think that you would like to cover, but it's not absolutely necessary, then know ahead of time that if you're off timeline, that is what you're going to skip, and make sure everyone in the group knows. And then if you can, reserve 5 minutes at the end to ask the participants to complete their evaluation. So even if their evaluation is on, a lot of times they're online on an app, like the meeting app or whatever, actually, if you can, reserve a few minutes and ask them to do that while they're still in the room, because it's great to be able to get feedback on your workshop so that the next time you present it, you know what you need to change. And also those evaluations can be used as evidence of your teaching, and also teaching evaluations when you're building an educator portfolio or when you're going up for promotion. And then last but not least, make sure that you recycle your workshop. I always tell people this: you do a lot of work to get that workshop together. Don't let it be a one and done. Always try to get extra mileage. So you could submit it as is to a different meeting, or even the same meeting again next year or in a few years if there are important changes in the evidence around that topic. You can expand it and make it into a pre-course or a symposium, which are typically longer. Usually you get 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, depending on the topic. But if there are more, if there's more about that specific topic that you'd love to cover, you can expand it and make it into a longer conference. Or you can contract it and make it into a local thing like a grand rounds or a noon conference or a pre-clinic conference. So you've done the work, try to get extra mileage from it in any way you can. I think this workshop that I'm doing, or this version of it, I think that us as a group, that we've probably presented it in like 20 or 30 different venues over the years. So look for opportunities to make things count twice, 3 times, and so on. Sometimes you can convert a workshop to a publication. And sometimes that takes the form of a descriptive piece or a book chapter or a systematic review. If it's on a specific topic that maybe came from a works in progress or out of preliminary data, you can go ahead and see that project to completion. I've had colleagues that actually used the workshop evaluations when they delivered it at national meetings as the curricular evaluation of that content. And so they've been able to publish essentially a slightly modified version of the workshop on MedEd portal, which is considered a peer review publication. So it's not a bad idea to think about how you can kind of make it bigger and disseminate it even beyond that national meeting. And then this is the group activity that I'm going to skip because I'm being flexible. And I planned that we will not do this activity if we're running out of time, which we are. So in summary, workshops serve as an important component to an academician's teaching portfolio. Keys to a successful workshop include choosing a novel or popular topic and appropriate collaborators, writing an appealing workshop submission, developing an interactive session, and presenting the workshop utilizing effective presentation skills. And remember, once it's complete, workshops can be used as a springboard for additional scholarly activity. I have to acknowledge the folks that originally collaborated with me on this idea probably 15 years ago. Folks listed there all used to be at Pitt and now are at various other places. And then just some references will be in the PowerPoint if Savannah sends them out or if you request them, they'll be there for you.